Hey there, outliers. Niiamah Ashong here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey here today. We have an incredible opportunity here. We are going to be spending some time here with an outlier. It's not even an outlier, a trailblazer who's been spending his time continuing to up-level himself and those around him for a long time. Mark, I would love for you to come on here and just say, I want to say thank you for spending the time here, creating. What I would say like a lifetime of work, behind you to uplift others and do it in a way that's really aligned for you. Thank you for coming on to the podcast here.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, well, Mark, I'd love for outliers to get to know you. Would you mind sharing more about you and the game that you're currently playing?
Sure. So in 1976, I left college. I was playing basketball on a scholarship, and I joined the Air Force. And I was a technician for 10 years, which was probably not the right seat on the bus for me, but I had to work twice as hard to be half as good. But I got into sales and I started selling projects and maintenance, and I did really, really well. And then I went to work for another company, and it went to the next level. And I did that for about 15 years. And then I was at a crossroads. I was the top salesman in my company. I was either going to start my own company or go into the training and education business, and I chose the latter. And so I went to work for a company called Edge Learning Institute. I learned how to present. I learned how to develop curriculum. And after 4 years, I left and went out on my own in 1997. And I've been doing speaking around the world. And I've written 8 books, working on number 9. Oh gosh, let's see. I have a podcast, uh, Mark Matteson on Books and People. I have an electronic newsletter that goes out to like 8,000 people. I do about 50 to 60 presentations a year around the globe. And I affectionately call them bathroom books. You can read them in 4 sittings if you don't mind your legs going numb. This is my first book. It's sold 250,000 copies, been translated into a dozen languages, which is insane because I flunked high school English.
And for anyone that's listening, the book is called Freedom from Fear.
Yes,
Yep.
there it is.
Yep.
And that led me to writing a second book called Freedom Forever because I got so much extraordinary feedback from that first book, which was, I don't know if it was luck or just the right time. I'm not sure, but it just took off, and it kind of has a life of its own now. And it's fun to talk to people that tell me that I see them years later. A lot of times I will give copies of the book out when I speak. Uh, I'll say, how many of you would, if I were to give you a book, would you read it? And then they raise their hand. But what I'm learning is, when I say, how many would you rather listen to a book than read it? 60% of the audience the last couple of years have raised their hand every single time, which means that people who don't really read much anymore, they'd rather listen to it on Audible. So I made my books available on Audible as well. Uh, I call it Windshield University, right? So, I love what I do. I've been able to travel around the world. I used to get in trouble for talking in school. Now I get paid for it. God bless America. You know, what I don't tell my clients is I would do it for free. That's how much I love it. Because, there's a job and then there's a career, then there's a calling. And to your point, I think people that commit to a calling are outliers. They're entrepreneurs. They see the world differently. And I did this for free for a long time, speaking. And then somebody said, how much do you charge? I said, I don't know. How much do you get paid? You get paid for this? People are actually getting money for doing this? Because I was just talking to high school kids and youth groups and, whoever would listen. I remember the first time I got a $25 honorarium. I was so excited. And then as things started to progress, this woman called me and she said, I understand you're an inspirational speaker. And I said, really? Who told you that? She said, my nephew, Steven. And I said, oh, great. He's a nice kid. She said, would you consider coming to speak to 400 freshmen at the high school? She said, I don't have much. All I have is $250. So I covered up the phone. I said, honey, this woman wants to pay me $250 to talk for an hour. My wife said, take it. So that was the beginning of this whole speaking thing. And it kind of went from there. So I love what I do. I get to do this. I had a woman say to me, oh my God, you're going to Australia? How long is that flight? I said, it's 14 hours from LAX to Sydney. So, oh, she said, do you have to travel? I said, no, I get to. This is a privilege. I love what I do. And I just finished my first TED Talk in August.
Nice, congrats.
which makes me smile. I did it. It was on my bucket list for a long time, about 5 years. And then finally one day I just said, I just have to do this because I have an idea that's worth spreading. So the TED Talk is Mark Matteson, Matteson, the letter, and then the word Raleigh, because that's where it was filmed. So it's only 11 minutes long, but I promise you, when you're done, you'll be different. It's an idea worth spreading.
So, Mark, I appreciate this, and I love how there are a couple of things I want to pull out right away, right? One of them is I love how like you've been an outlier and a trailblazer for a long time, and what I like, the reason I like to call that in here is that you were trailblazing in this kind of field, speaking all that stuff before it became convenient, before there were like people like I don't know, academies and courses that people can just download. Like you've been doing this game before it was cool. That's generally what I feel, right? You're like I went off on my own in 1997, right? Uh the access to like infrastructure, like to capital, like there's so many different barriers that were there, or so many different things that didn't exist to make it easier to do things right now. And I just want to take some time to just acknowledge that like I just want to acknowledge you in doing that and to successfully been doing that for multiple decades here. I really just want to just to see you real quick
I
and
appreciate that.
acknowledge
Well, I'm self-employed. When I call in sick, I know I'm lying.
that.
Worst boss I ever had.
Yeah.
But I'm also the best. I take 6 weeks off. When my kids were young, I took 6 weeks off in July and 6 weeks off in December. And the rest of the year, I worked like 16-hour days.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to me, that was worth it because my kids grew up traveling. And, what I told my kids from the time they were young enough to understand, I said, your future's so bright, it burns my eyes. You're going to go so much farther than I ever did in school, sports, and business. And I said that hundreds and hundreds of times. And then one day they believed me. And now all three boys are grown and they own their own homes. They have good jobs. They're creating their own families. I have five grandkids now. Uh, I'm just blessed, and I get to do what I love. Even during COVID, I went from doing 60 or 70 talks a year down to like 15. So I had all this time on my hands. And I was doing webinars and, a lot of this, obviously. But I thought, if I have all this extra time, why don't I write? So during COVID, over a 4 year period, I wrote two books. And one of them is over 300 pages, which isn't like my normal length of the
That
duration.
that that that's a six-seater. Six
Yeah,
sitting.
yeah. Here it is. Here, it's called "Old Light Through New Windows," right? And it's thick. And what it was this was a love letter to my grandkids. There's 52 questions that change your life, right? And then I tell stories, and at the end there's a question, and you kind of fill out. It's kind of a workbook of sorts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to me, my grandkids were my legacy, and I wanted to make sure that I left them something that was just for them. So I don't talk about this book very much just because I kind of wrote it for them, but people seem to really appreciate them. So I talked to a woman yesterday that I hadn't talked to in a while. She said she just retired, and she said, "I love all your books." She goes, "You got new ones?" I said, "Since you and I talked last, I've got three new ones." Right now, let me tell you why I write. So writing books is it obviously to augment in my income, but I write because I have to. I write because I read 50 pages a day. I read two books a week. And when you keep doing that, when you keep pouring things into your head, it's almost like this glass of water. Okay. Reading is pouring water into the glass. And if you keep pouring and pouring and pouring and you don't stop, it overflows and lands on the desk and the floor. And what's on the desk and the floor is the writing. That's my theory about why people write anyway.
I
I
love it.
just have too much in my head. I got to get it out.
Well, I love these aspects here, and what part of what I want to pull out here for any outlier and trailblazer that's listening is Mark. What I feel from you is you found ways to allow things to evolve organically, right? And it's not to say that there hasn't been like inorganic like action, like you talked earlier. Like, look, we were taking 6 weeks off twice a year, and I was taking doing 16-hour days up leading up to them, right? So like you've done work. right? Like the work that you do, you're like, I would do it for free, like, but like you've put in effort, and I think I want to make sure I call that out in terms of the effort element, because I think there's a tendency for people to like to just miss out on, like, there was effort put in, but it was aligned effort. You're like, I'm getting paid to talk. I'm going to talk anyway. I would do it for free, and I'm going to figure out how to do this so that I can take extended, like, I don't even know if it's extended, but take time off with my family on my schedule, and find and transmute the timing in other ways to make that like possible, you know?
Right.
So I want to call that out in there and call that in, because the more that I talk to different people and listeners of the show, like, there's an element here of like, hey, as you get into what you want to do, please, like, let's not leave out like the active work that's involved to get to a place where you have a lot of passive income that's coming your way. I think right
Right.
now, like, things seem skewed off, where it's like, oh, we can just start off and just go for it, right? Not to say you.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book. He's one thing he says. He goes, "One thing that works every time: hard work." It's
Mhm.
fantastic. You know?
I love it.
Get out, get to the chopper. There's a bomb in there. He's like, I love his. I met him in 1982. He was promoting Conan the Librarian, or one of those Aryan movies he did, and the guy had a 29-inch waist with 25-inch arms. Which, if you really think about that, he looked like a wasp. Just like. And he was sitting signing these posters, and he goes, "Have you seen the movie?" And I said, "Yeah, I went last week." He goes, "Go again, bring a friend." I said, "Okay, okay." So, so back to the writing. So I'm fixing this ice machine. I'm 25 years old. I'm in this Horizon House in Seattle. If grandma's in the Horizon House, your family has some coin. Okay. And the lunch bell rings, and 35 women are chasing George. And George is like 90. And he's like, "Oh, God, not again." And they're like, "You, George, sit with me." And I started laughing. And then I went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, where's all the dudes?" And the answer, they're dead. Okay. So the next 2 years, I read everything I could find on longevity. And I determined there were three obvious things and one less obvious. One, women eat better than we do. They eat less and they eat better. Number two, they exercise on a regular basis. They do it in groups. And the third thing they do is they talk about real stuff. And men don't do any of those three things as a general rule, most of the population, right? But the fourth one was the one that really got my attention. If I am what I do, when I don't, I'm not. If all my worth comes from my work and I don't work anymore, now I'm less than? And the answer is yes, unequivocally. So I said to myself, what can I do that I can do up to the day I die? And the answer was writing. And so I bought a used typewriter and I started writing stories. And I was writing and I was writing and I was writing journals every day and I was typing and typing and typing. And then one day the University of Washington called me and they said, "We'd like you to submit a, a, a curriculum, effective communication." So they paid me 3 grand to do that. We recorded on audio cassette. That's how old this story is. And 9 people read it. No, wait, 10, my mother. It had a small audience. And that's when I realized writing a book was a terrible goal. What I wanted was a best-selling book. So I wrote that as a goal. I looked at it every day, 5 or 6 times a day. And a year later, I'd done all kinds of research on what best-selling books look like. I wrote Freedom from Fear. And I sent the manuscript to a mentor of mine. His name was Charlie Tremendous Jones. And I said, "Charlie, I just want your opinion." He goes, "This is a terrific story. I want to publish it." And he said, I said, "You're a publisher?" He said, "What do you think Executive Books is, an underwear store?" And I said, "Well, how does this thing work?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to print 10,000 copies. And I'm going to give 1,000 to you to sell in the back of the room." And I said, "The back of what room?" He said, "Where you speak." I went, "Oh, right." Like I knew. I said, "Well, how much should I charge?" He said, "A 20 is not too much." So I started selling my books in the back of the room and everything took off after that. And it all started, I was fixing an ice machine at the Horizon House in Seattle.
You
And there
know,
were 35 women and one dude.
so I love this. You mind if I just keep pulling out some nuggets of what I'm getting from this here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm clearly getting some from it.
Yeah. So there's like a couple different things that are showing up for me. One, is like identifying a problem, that identifying an opportunity, right? You're paying attention, right? And it was like, and what you saw was like, this is how the world is right now, but it doesn't need to be this way, right?
Not for
Um,
me.
not for you, right? I love that. And then you brought this up twice. I did research. I spent 2 years doing research when it came to longevity. You then talked later on when you were talking about like making a best-selling book. You talked about doing research. And so I wouldn't like call that in like part of your process, like, okay, now let me go figure out how to make this happen. But you also gave it time, right? It's like, and I'm calling that out, Mark, because I have like a new relationship with time. Like I describe it now, like you're catching me at a time where um I'm making moves in my business. I'm changing things around, and I'm used to like running like a what I would call like a 5K, right? And the 5K, I'm able to start the race, and then like within 20 minutes or so, like I'm done, right? And I get the accolades, the people who are there chasing all that. But right now, I feel like I'm on mile 34 of an ultra marathon, and like there's no one there, and it's just like the legs are just moving, and I'm just continuing forward. And so I really appreciate how you uh, basically like the montage part of it. Like you spent 2 years researching, you spent a year doing this, and you talk about the amount of time like you're putting in. I see how many like I see that you keep putting in the reps, and it's in this conversation, at least today, like that's become increasingly important to me, mainly because I look at this and I'm like, why am I not there yet? What did I do wrong? What am I missing? And I would actually love to get your thoughts on this, given your experience and the way that you look at life and you move through life. When you've been in those situations where like things didn't feel like they were working out for you, right? Or you're in the middle of open heart surgery and this is like just like I'm just not done yet. Like, how did you like uh, continue to move forward? Like, what were some of the things that you found worked for you to continue doing the reps when you weren't getting, the returns, right away?
Sure. Goals, persistence, one day at a time, and hard work, right? So in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which is phenomenal, he talks about a story about Jerry Seinfeld. Seinfeld, when he first started in 1976 and doing stand up, he made a decision. I'm going to write an hour every day. I'm going to write jokes for an hour every day with a yellow legal pad and a 19-cent Bic ballpoint pen. And he got an insurance calendar from his father's company and a red marker. And day one, he wrote for an hour. He put a red X on the calendar. Day two, he wrote. He put a red X on the calendar. He said, my goal was to never break the chain. Now, if you read his book, Is This Something? There's a picture of him on the back of the book, and it shows him an aerial view of him sitting in the middle of the street with all those legal pads spread out and covering an entire block. For 40 years, he never broke the chain. He wrote for an hour every single day. And to me, that story is analogous to the causes of success. Figure out what you want to do, commit to doing it, and do certain things consistently over an extended period of time. When I'm not traveling, I mail out 5 to 10 books a day. This is my new book, When I'm Old. I mailed out 10 copies yesterday. I'll mail out 5 more today. Over the weekend, I'll bundle up. And the bottom line is this: for every 50 or 60 books that I mail out, somebody calls and said, are you available to speak in May? Right? And my calendar's full through May now because I've mailed out three. Well, I have a little, I have my own little red X calendar. So every time I mail out a book, I write it down. I've mailed out 316 books so far since October,
Mhm.
right? So it's consistency and it's deciding what you want, why you want it. There's a great film called How Do You Know with Reese Witherspoon, Owen Wilson, and Paul Rudd. And it's Jack Nicholson's last film. It came out in 2013. She goes to see this psychiatrist, played brilliantly by Tony Shalhoub from Monk, and she was cut from her national championship team. She'd the MVP the year before, and she didn't know what she was going to do. She was at a crossroads. So she goes to see this guy, and she says, I don't know why I'm here. She said, I'm going to leave. He said, that's fine. She reaches for the door, and she stops. She goes, okay, is there one piece of advice you can offer someone that would solve any problem every single time? He said, yeah, I think I can answer that. She said, great. What is it? He said, figure out what you want and learn how to ask for it. And she said, wow, both of those things are really hard. And he said, I know. And to me, that's all I've ever done since I was 14 years old. was set goals on 3x5 cards and look at those cards, bombard my subconscious with those goals over and over and over again. It's real simple. Figure out what you want and learn how to ask for it. I write out a goal. I list 3 or 4 reasons why I want to achieve it. And I bombard my subconscious with that goal 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a day. I have it on the dashboard of my car. I have it by my bedside. I have it in every book I'm reading because I become what I think about, which is why I wrote a book with that title. We become what we think about. So you got to understand, in 8th grade, I got cut from the basketball team, and I was so mad. And one of two things happens when something like that happens to a youngster. You either get mad and get going and start working towards it, or you give up and you do something else. Well, I wasn't going to give up. I was going to prove Kim Wilson wrong. So I went to the best player I knew at our high school. His name was Kenny Christensen. He was averaging 20 points a game as an 8th grader on the 9th grade team. I said, Kenny, how did you get so good? He said, I shoot 2 hours every day and I go to Bob Huberg's basketball camp. I said, bring me a brochure. So he did. And I earned the money to go to camp. And the next summer, I spent a week at the camp. I learned what to practice in the 2 hours, but I shot every single day from that day in that conversation with Kenny until the following summer. And the next year I made the team. Now I grew 9 inches. That didn't hurt, but I would have made it regardless because I put in the time. I couldn't be working any harder on my game. In my sophomore year, this guy comes to our high school to speak. His name was Bob Moad. He'd won a state championship in basketball and he turned into this inspirational speaker who ironically 20 years later I went to work for. But I attended a 2-day seminar he gave for $45, Super Bowl weekend, 1971. I had 50 pages of notes and I set goals to be the best basketball player on our team. I went from scrub to star on the team in 3 weeks. I went from a 1.8 to a 3.8 with my grades in 1 quarter using his goal setting techniques. And I've been setting goals ever since. And that's why the books do well. That's why I stay busy is I figured out what I wanted and I learned how to ask for it. But other than that, I got nothing. I really
Well,
can't.
let's slow let's if you don't mind, I'm gonna just keep drilling down on this. I appreciate your stories. I appreciate like the element of it. And there's something about like there's a casual element of like you just know. Like, I feel like there's a knowing in you that like, hey, if I set out a goal, I'm gonna get it. Right. I like I'll have to I'll bombard my mind. I'll do the work for it. But it's once the goal is set, it will be mine. Like I just get that sense from you. I'm seeing you nod your head here. Like, all right, awesome. So I'm hearing this here. I want to call out a couple things for outliers as we're listening out. Again, I'm going to keep like looking out for the nuance because there are things that you're saying, Mark, that are like they're just so true and you're saying it so loudly and but at the same time I feel like outliers don't always get like people don't always get a chance to like hear some of the nuance in there. One of them you talked about you send you know that for every 50 books you send you get a call, right? For every 50 books you send you get a call, and like that's something that's relatively new and fresh to me to understand that like it's not like you don't know which one of the 50. It could be the first 50 books you send in that rotation, you know. But for out of every 50 books that go out, you're gonna get a call around these things. And like there's
And guess
something that
what? It doesn't always necessarily come from the people I sent it to.
mm,
It's the law of compensation. You can't keep sending out ships and not get some come back.
yeah,
When I was in basic training, I wrote a letter, sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 of them every day for the 6 weeks. One day I got 9 letters. The sergeant would say, "Okay, line up for the 9 times." He called my name, and the guy next to me in the bunk said, "Can I read one of your letters? I haven't gotten any." I said, "Well, how many did you write?" He said, "I didn't write any."
yeah,
I said, "Well, there you go. You can't
yeah.
expect to get a letter if you don't write them." That's
This
the principle, right?
I'm getting goosebumps as you say this right now, Mark, right? Because it's the element of like starting first, right? Like initiating. I know when I was looking into coaching and working on my coaching, there was a step in the process. It was like connect, and I was like, oh, I have to go connect with people. And the person behind it's like, you can also connect other people. Like there's an element of giving first, and then coming back and receiving. And I love this other component of it, where if I'm getting you right, you might have sent your books to 50 people, they may have read it, maybe they didn't. They may have passed it on to someone else, or they might have mentioned like, oh yeah, like, but you were in the minds of 50 people, and
Right.
they received a real tangible gift, and they know, and we know that writing a book doesn't just happen, you know. Um, so this is like I love this component here in Outliers. Like if you are feeling like you're in the slog of it, think about it. It's not 50 books. It's not it's 10 books a day, right? 10 books every day. And like that involves finding who you're sending it to, figuring out how to get their contact information, sending it out. Like there's work involved, right? And so what I'm like, in order to do that, I'm assuming you have some kind of system that you are able to use at hand. I saw that you shared with us the tracking in the book. Um, I'd love for you to pick up from here a little bit.
Bless you.
Yeah, so outliers. I just had a massive sneeze. I didn't want to have you have to deal with that. But I love this component of like you know what the inputs are and you keep doing the outputs. And you know, like when you talked about getting cut from eighth grade, like this, you know, I'm just like I'm loving what you're saying here, Mark. I'm loving it all. Um, you talked about when you got cut, and then you went to the best person you knew and you asked them what they did. Right. I love like, and then you actually did it. Right. And then there's one other thing that in what you said that I think is a piece of nuance that I just think is just so important. When you got to the camp, you learned what to practice in the 2 hours.
Right.
And that part to me, I think also, and I'm reflecting on myself here, but like I can do volume. There's times where I've done a lot of work, but I didn't know what to be working on. And so without
Right.
that like insight into where to put to focus the attention, like those 2 hours I would put in and the 2 hours you would put in, you would actually get far more from those 2 hours than I would. It might take me 3 or 4 hours to get the same, the equivalent of the same thing because I wasn't working on the things that made a difference at that time during that time. Can you speak a little bit to like how you've like how you go about finding out like what works. It's like sometimes we get a chance to go to camp, sometimes we get to work with a mentor
Sure.
or something like that. But
Yeah.
how do you do that as you continue growing through?
So my second year in sales, I was reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which I pretty much read every year, all these years later. And I got the idea, what if I contacted the 20 most successful people selling what I was selling from around the country? Because there was a list, it was an association. So I found out who those 20 people were, and I created 20 questions, and I mailed them a letter. Some of them I faxed, so it's an old story. And I said, if you fill out these questions, here are the other 19 people I'm sending this to. I will type up the report and send it back to you as a thank you. 17 people of the 20 responded. It was a 6-page article that ended up being the first magazine article I had in a magazine, in this case, Contracting Business. But most importantly, I found out what to do. So there was a guy named Ken Edens from Ontario, California. And he says, well, dude, I like sit on my back porch at 6 a.m. with a cup of coffee and I think about my top 3 prospects with a legal pad and a pen. It's like, okay, I'll start doing that. I talked to a woman in Kentucky. Her name was Cindy Myers. And she said, well, Mark, no matter how busy I am, I always make time for my phone calls. So no matter how busy I am, and bit by bit, slowly but surely, I started applying the things that they told me. And all that was a callback to Kenny Christensen in 8th grade. I had 20 Kenny Christensens giving me great advice. I doubled my sales the next year by doing the things that they were doing. And quite frankly, that simple system of asking has informed every chapter of my life in ways I can't even. For example, I asked Charlie Tremendous Jones how he sold 2 million copies of a fairly mediocre book called Life is Tremendous. And I told him as much. I read it. It was good, but I don't know if it changed my life or not. Made me think a little bit. I said, how did you sell 2 million copies? He laughed and he goes, oh, tremendous, Mark. I gave 200,000 away. And that was his response. He always said things like that. He was larger than life. God rest his soul. So I give away books on airplanes. I have clients like Aflac, ConocoPhillips, uh, Peterbilt, Kenworth, Trident Seafoods, Microsoft, Amazon, because I met senior executives on an airplane sitting in first class because I got a million miles. I'm a diamond on Delta. But my seatmates, I do what I call the listening game. I did it with you when we first started. I asked you a question and you led by answering the question. The listening game says, can I get somebody to talk for 15 minutes without them knowing they've been doing all the talking? And I win every time. And this one lady talked for an hour and a half. And then finally she goes, oh my God, I've been talking this whole time. What do you do? And without getting out of my seat, I reached up in the overhead and grabbed a copy of Freedom from Fear and I handed it to her. She gave me her business card. 3 weeks later, she called and she said, we have an event coming up, some team building. All our managers are coming down from Alaska. It's a $2 billion company. She said, can you facilitate a team building session for the afternoon? Never once did I tell her in that plane conversation that I was this tremendous speaker and facilitator and I could really help her. I never talked about what I did at all. All I did was give her a book and listen. And that was a game changer for me. It was like, I don't learn anything when I'm talking. I only learn when I'm listening. And so listening to my customers, listening to my clients, listening to complete strangers. My favorite question to ask is, how did you get started in the business that you're in? And everybody loves to talk about themselves. Or if I meet a couple, a lot of times I'll be doing a keynote and I'm there at 7 o'clock for an 8:30 start and I'm setting everything up. And a couple will get there early. They'll be sitting in the front row, kind of waiting for it to start. And I'll walk up to them and say, so how did you two meet? And everybody loves to tell the How I Met Your Mother story, right? So I make connections with people. I did that when I TED Talk. There were 10 of us. And as people were coming in, I went into the audience, introduced myself, and said, why did you come today? Right. And one of the other speakers, this huge dude, 6'9", 320, just muscles, massive guy. He's a stunt double for The Rock, right? So he said, I saw what you did, man. You went into the audience, you made friends with most of the people in the room before you ever stepped on the stage. I said, yeah, it's a simple, I said, busted, you got me, lock me up. And because I'm building one-to-one relationships with people. And then afterwards, I hang around, I sign books, I answer questions. I got to share the stage with Rocky Bleier and Larry Zonka, two football greats from the 70s. And Zonka was a better speaker, but he left after his talk and didn't hang around to talk to anybody or sign autographs. Rocky Bleier, though he wasn't a better speaker, hung around afterwards, let people try on his Super Bowl rings. He signed books and answered questions. And Matt Peterson, this president of York at the time, said, I've already hired Rocky again. He said, but Zonka, I'll never hire that guy again. He said, I've never seen a 275-pound guy move so fast after dinner. And I thought to myself, I want to be like, you know, the guy who hangs around. I want to be like Rocky Bleier. And then he says to me after my talk, he came up to me and he said, you're one of the best speakers I ever heard. I said, but no, you're Rocky Bleier. Like, one of my heroes, right? So I got to meet Magic Johnson, spend 20 minutes with him in the green room. The last thing he said to me is, are your boys still playing basketball? How he knew that, I don't know. He probably had his assistant do research on me. But Magic's the kind of guy that makes you feel important right away. And he's contagious. He has this 1,000-watt smile, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'7", and I'm 265, but I look small next to Magic. His hands are gigantic, right? But the nicest man you'll ever meet. How do you not like Magic Johnson?
These are like there are a couple things I want to just like keep pulling out here. It's fun talking to you, Mark. It's really fun talking to you. So just thank you for bringing like the energy you bring. Thank you for bringing like leading the way that you lead, and for honing your craft and your stories. Like you're a phenomenal storyteller, and it's fun to be in to be in conversation with you. Um,
Thank you. I appreciate
yeah,
that. I've worked really hard at that, by the way.
yeah, and that's what I keep letting to call out. I want to keep calling out like you've worked really hard, and like and there's an element here where it comes off as um smooth. Like I said earlier, like there's a casual knowing that you're gonna reach your goals, like smooth, casual, fun, in the moment, present, all those things. And that, like, what I get is that it comes from doing reps, putting yourselves in rooms with Magic Johnson, like to be there so that the story can happen, so that you can. And then what I see is that you're constantly learning.
Right.
You're reading 50 pages a day,
Yep.
and on top of that, like I feel like every instance in your life, you're able to pick something up. There isn't a wasted moment there, and you're consistently adding to your repertoire, and then you're building on it by actually making it yours. Yeah,
But do you know why I read 50 pages a day,
I'm curious.
and why I keep a journal, and why I set goals, and why I've listened to 40,000 hours of audio in my car over the last 20 or 30 years? I do all those things because someone that I met that was doing what I wanted to do and had been where I wanted to go, that's what they were doing. Larry McCurdy's written, I don't know, 10 or 15 best-selling books, made into movies. He read 50 pages a day. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. Stephen King wrote, 10 pages a day or 4 hours, whichever came first. So I said, I'm going to write 1 hour a day or 3 pages, whichever comes first. And once I find the causes of success in any arena, I borrow boldly from the best, right? Schwarzenegger created the split routine where he worked out twice a day, 6 days a week. Nobody had ever done that. 5 hours a day he worked out. When he got into Hollywood, he studied acting, improv, took all kinds of, he worked out 5 hours a day in acting. When he decided to get into politics, it was the same thing. It was 5 hours a day. So it doesn't matter what you want to accomplish. Okay. Once you set the goal and you know what you want and why you want it, there is someone who's done what you want to do and been where you want to go. Who are they? That's why I called Charlie Jones. I just picked up the phone. I never met the guy. I picked up the phone and called him because I was listening to his audio program and I laughed so hard I had to pull off the road to call him. And I said, do you ever come to Seattle? Can I pick you up at the airport? Can I drive you to your gig? I mean, I find these mentors and I ask, how can I serve? How can I help them? And if they're really good, I'll pay $500 an hour to have them coach me. I started coaching about 15 years ago because somebody said, how have you written all these books? I want to write one. So I spent an hour with the guy on the phone. And he said, oh, this is really valuable. I took 10 pages of notes. I said, oh, I'm glad. I said, the first hour is always free. And then he said, would you be willing to do this once a month? He said, I'll pay you. And I said, okay. Now, I've never been certified as a coach, but I've coached hundreds of people over the last 15 years because they reached out to me, not me to them. And I think it's because I did what they want to do and had been where they want to go, just like I did.
All right, so there's a
But
couple.
other than that, I got nothing.
Uh,
I really can't help.
there's a couple things that play out here as you say this. That's come up for me. One, uh, you find the inputs of success, and then you just go on it. You're like, who's done it? What like, and what I get, Mark, in that statement. So I'm listening for like some of the different nuance of like, what is it that you're saying that I might have heard but I didn't get, you know? I'm someone who like I may not read 50 books, but I might read the same book 50 times if I find like the right person. Because each time I grow, I implement, I come back, I'm like, oh, I thought they meant it this way, or I had it in the wrong order, so on
Right,
and so forth,
right.
right? Um, and so some things that I'm hearing from you is like you I see how you keep implementing, and there's something in there where what I don't hear from you is, well, like, well, that person did it, so it's already been done, so I can't do it, one, or I'm not that person, so I can't do it. Like, you just go and you say, like, what are the inputs that you're putting in? Because I like the outputs that you're getting. I like
Well,
yeah.
and to your point, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
opposite of the negative thinking. Yeah, it's the right. You have to have the right mindset.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people say, "Well, why do you read so much?" I said, "Because here's the thing. I want people to say, I heard him 5 years ago, and man, has he improved." I don't want them to say, I heard him 5 years ago when he was really something.
Oof, there's something that just like hit me hard, because again, we're going. I'm starting to realize maybe it's the kids, maybe it's just being in business longer that like 5 years are gonna come by, right? And it's like, and it's there's just such I again, I'm being really honest, like I'm working on my mentality of stretching out time, looking on longer time horizons, because it's like that those 5 years will come in, and if you are I hear you play long games. I hear that you focus more on the process goals than the outcome goals. Now you know what your outcome is, but then you're like, I'm just going to do the inputs until the result that I want comes up. And we were talking about like coaching for the last 15 years and like people reaching out to you because you've done great things. You've done epic things and they're like, I want that in my life as well. Right. And there's something there where it's like, first things first, go do great things. How do you do great things? Put in great inputs and continue to keep building. And so I'm seeing so much here that like I think it's just like I think there's just a simplicity to this whole thing. You're doing a lot.
It's absurdly simple.
Yeah.
Charlie Jones said to me, "You're going to be the same person in 5 years, except for two things: the people you associate with and the books that you read." And after he died, as an homage to him, I started doing a podcast called Mark Matteson on Books and People. And I did it because I thought it'd be a really fun thing to do. And I wanted to find people that you've never heard of that have done something extraordinary, like Sylvia Hampel. She built the largest woman-owned business in Idaho. She was married with three kids, 28 years old, had an air traffic controlling job, and her husband walked out on her. He just left. She couldn't do her job anymore. She started cleaning toilets in the neighborhood. And she's 5 foot nothing, 90 pounds. I was speaking in Boise to 500 people, and she came up afterwards, bought all my books, and said, I want to buy you dinner. And I said, I'd love to have dinner. Me and food go back a long way. And she told me her story. And I said, I got to get you on my podcast. Right. So I try to find interesting people you never heard of that have done something extraordinary, regular folks doing extraordinary things. So I don't have too many famous people, but if you've written a book that's worth reading, I'll have you on my show. If you've done something worth talking about, I'll have you on my show. I only do two a month, but with my travel schedule, that fits my schedule, right? So
So
yeah,
it's incredible here. Mark, we're gonna like there's way more that I wanted to get into, but I think this is a great opportunity for us to start wrapping up for today. And Outliers,
yep.
Mark just gave you a great way to go further into his world with the podcast. What other ways can Outliers like go deeper and down the journey with you?
Well, oh, with me, in other words, to reach out to me, is that
Yep.
what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, so my phone number, let's start with old school. Phone number 206 697 0454. That's 206 697 0454. Or just type in Google, type in my name, Mark Matteson, Matteson. It'll come up the first 12 or 15. I've got stuff on YouTube. I've got things on my website, sparkingsuccess.net, my website. Uh, yeah, I'm the easiest guy to find, because I'm all over the internet. And
Yeah. Clearly, because people are reaching out, right?
yeah,
It's like
I'm
it,
almost doing as many being a guest on podcasts as I am, on having guests on my podcast.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's fun. I love doing it, and it's the new medium. It's the medium, not the message. Marshall McLuhan said.
Mm.
So, and let me just end with this thought. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something that you really, really want. If you're called to do something, start doing it. Ready, fire, aim. Just get started. Start reading, start writing, start talking to people who have done what you want to do and been where you want to go. Become a student. If somebody says read this one book, by all means read that book, but then read three others in that same genre and make up your own mind. And understand that it really is one day at a time. And the first journey, Martin Luther King said, begins with the first step. So this is the United States. This is the greatest country in the world. There's no limit on what we can accomplish. Um, I love what I do. I'll be doing this until they pry my laptop from my cold, dead fingers. You know, uh, uh, all my mentors, Zig Ziglar, Charlie Jones, Jim Rohn, Lou Tice, all those guys were speaking well into their 80s and 90s. And I'm 40, 27. So, I'll be doing this for a while. I figure I got about 10 more books in me and hundreds of more talks before I'm done. And I have no desire to retire. I mean, why? I have friends retiring. They go, when are you going to retire? I said, so I can what? Travel, spend time with my wife, see my grandkids. They said, well, yeah. I said, well, I'm doing all these things now since 1997. Why would I stop doing that? To do what?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I
I
really
love the way
appreciate you having me on your show.
Mark, I love the way you look at the world. It's been really, really wonderful here. And you said something. I think I would feel bad if I didn't put this in here. You talked about like I want to say like you are a giver. And I love how you give first. Even like that first hour is always free. Like so many people think like I can't do it for free. I'm like, you're out there like sending the books costs postage, it costs time, it costs gas. Like you have to print out the books. Like it's not, it's like there's an investment in there, right? And I just really want to just I want to like I appreciate you for like showing and not dwelling on like the important parts of giving first and doing and bringing out in the world over here. I honestly leave this conversation. I'm like, yeah, of course we can do it. You know, we can literally do anything right now, right? So, Allies, I haven't asked of you. I think that the world, I think that your world would really benefit if you can share this episode with them. So please take some time to share this episode with them. I think it'd be a really wonderful treat for them. And also join us in the one person, one conversation at a time initiative, which is after you share it out on like your socials and such, go and find one person in your world who you feel would really benefit from this conversation. Mark has brought in so much value here, and I like to think of this as us giving that person the gift of this conversation, almost as if this conversation was just for them. To me, the one thing is about um, and this is where I think that the real impact is actually going to be made from this podcast, and it's actually just one person at a time being reached with an incredible message that's right for them. So thank you for that, Mark. I end up every conversation by just asking, what's the biggest insight that you got from today's conversation? So this is not for them. Outliers are good, but for you, Mark Matteson, as yourself, like what's an insight? What's a takeaway you're taking?
Teddy Roosevelt said, "You can have everything you want in life, everything, if you just help enough other people get what they want first." I like
Well,
that.
thank you.
Kind
Thank
of
you
live
much.
my life that way.
And with that, we'll end here. Outliers, until the next time we talk, go out, go forth and be you on purpose. Journey on.